Welcome to Star-Spangled Awesomeness, where we dive headfirst into the chaos left by the Biden administration, now being masterfully untangled by Donald Trump. I'm your host, an ordinary American who's seen through the smoke and mirrors of mainstream media to grasp the raw, unfiltered truth. Join us as we celebrate this new golden era, shining a light on the corruption and injustices that the media loves to sweep under the rug. Here, we'll showcase the vibrant resurgence of America, reclaiming its former glory. Thank you for tuning in to witness the spectacular comeback of the greatest nation on Earth. Let's waste no more time and get into it. The power of Donald Trump. Isn't it interesting that the Russia-Ukraine war started 3 years ago, but the moment Donald Trump comes back into office, all of a sudden Europe now decides to have an emergency summit to discuss Ukraine. It's so obvious that the EU is in reactive mode, trying to scramble to get something together as if they're initiating stopping this war. I thank my lucky stars that Donald J. Trump is our current president. No longer is America being walked on, taken advantage of, as well as looked at as the piggy bank. These so-called leaders from the EU, G7, NATO, all those NGOs, they don't want this money train to end because they were living so well off the United States taxpayer back. I would like to repeat that it's estimated that the United States has given approximately $350 billion for this war, of which it's being reported that Zelensky has no idea where $100 billion of that U.S. taxpayer money went.
Europe has given a very much smaller percentage than that. I think Europe has given $100 billion, and we've given, let's say, 300 plus. Where is all the money that's been given? Where is it going? And I've never seen an accounting of it. We give hundreds of billions of dollars. I don't see any accounting. So I want to see peace. Look, you know why I want? Because I don't want all these people killed anymore.
30 days into Donald Trump's presidency, and he is trying to negotiate for peace. But these warmongers in the EU, particularly the UK, want to keep this money party going. Watch how former Prime Minister Boris Johnson lies to the world on Piers Morgan.
First of all, let me say how absolutely tragic it is to be here in Kyiv with this war still going on, and how heroic the Ukrainians are. They are going to win. They will be successful. But, you know, how ugly and unpleasant it is to hear some of the misrepresentations that have come out of Washington in the last 10 days or so, really peddling the Kremlin line, such as the one actually that you've just repeated, saying that Ukraine was responsible, started this war, saying that Zelensky is a dictator, saying the Ukrainians could have done some deal early on in this war, got the Russians out, that wouldn't have involved a complete humiliation for Ukrainians. It's just lies. It's just rubbish. And it's very painful for people who care about Ukraine, actually know the facts, to listen to this stuff.
So Boris Johnson effectively is calling our leaders in Washington liars. So let's set Boris Johnson straight, one at a time.
Saying that Ukraine was responsible, started this war, just lies. It's just rubbish.
No, it's not. That's the truth. Ukraine did start the war in 2014.
Petro Poroshenko will have a hard time winning back hearts and minds in this city. As the people of Donetsk sweep up the debris of their homes and livelihoods, they are hardened against a president they say is killing his own people. We are Ukrainian, but they kill us, this man says. So we probably need our own country, because these people in Kiev, they are not brothers for us. The shells hit these homes days ago, but the tears are still fresh.
We live underground. It was so hard for 2 weeks, especially for 27, 28, 29th. But only today it's quiet. Sorry, I need to go.
2 people were killed outside this block of flats last Wednesday. One of them was a 50-year-old woman, the other a 34-year-old woman. Her husband, who won't talk to us, he says he's in shock. managed to make it down to the cellar with their little child, but she just didn't have the time. And this is a story that repeats itself over and over in dozens of apartment blocks, with civilians being killed by the constant shelling around Donetsk. The city's trauma hospital is filled with the civilian wounded, shrapnel embedded in the flesh and bone of market sellers' legs, the broken limbs of pensioners far too old to run. There was one war, and this is the second war, this old lady tells me. I was born in 1940 in World War II, and I will probably die before this war is over. Valentina Popova in the next-door ward lost her leg and her arm to indiscriminate artillery shells. Switching to the Ukrainian language, she makes a heart-rending plea to the president. We used to dance, sing, do everything in Ukrainian, she says. Poroshenko, Mr. Poroshenko, please listen to us. Why don't you understand your people? Be a man, be human. Please stop your aggression. Stop this war. But there is little...
Saying that Zelensky is a dictator, just lies. It's just rubbish.
So is Boris Johnson calling our president a liar?
We're hearing that Russia wants to force Ukraine to hold new elections in order to sign any kind of a peace deal. Is that something that the U.S. would ever support?
Well, we have a situation where we haven't had elections in Ukraine, where we have martial law, or essentially martial law in Ukraine, where the leader in Ukraine, I mean, I hate to say it, but he's down at 4% approval rating, and where a country has been blown to smithereens. You got most of the cities are laying on their sides. The buildings are collapsed. It looks like a massive demolition site. The whole, I mean, so many of the cities. I mean, they haven't done it in Kiev because I guess they don't want to shoot too many rockets in there. They've done it 20%, but they haven't done it 100%. If they wanted to do it 100%, it would probably happen very quickly. But you have cities that are absolutely decimated. And yeah, I would say that, you know, when they want a seat at the table, you could say the people have to, wouldn't the people of Ukraine have to say, like, you know, it's been a long time since we've had an election. That's not a Russia thing. That's something coming from me and coming from many other countries also.
Saying the Ukrainians could have done some deal early on in this war, got the Russians out, that wouldn't have involved a complete humiliation for Ukrainians. It's just lies. It's just rubbish.
Oh, is it, Boris Johnson? So are you now calling Robert F. Kennedy Jr. a liar?
In April of 2022, President Biden sent Boris Johnson to Ukraine to force President Zelensky to tear up a peace agreement that he and the Russians had already signed, and the Russians were withdrawing troops from Kiev and Donbass and Lugansk. And that peace agreement would have brought peace to the region and would have allowed Donbass and Lugansk to remain part of Ukraine. President Biden stated that month that his objective in the war was regime change in Russia. His Defense Secretary, Lloyd Austin, simultaneously explained that America's purpose in the war was to exhaust the Russian army, to degrade its capacity to fight anywhere else in the world. These objectives, of course, have nothing to do with what they were telling Americans about protecting Ukraine's sovereignty.
You know, the other thing that it's been bothering me for a long time, because I solved the problem with NATO. They paid hundreds of billions of dollars into the funds of NATO when I said you got to pay, because the United States was paying for European countries, and then they take advantage of us on trade.
But Piers, you know, and I've seen some of your commentary on this, I remain optimistic nonetheless that there is method in Donald Trump's madness, and actually that by shaking things up in the way that he is, he can continue to drive the process of peace in Ukraine. Look at what's happening with this deal now on resources. Actually, it contains some great stuff for Ukraine. It's not yet agreed. It's the one that the Americans proposed to the Ukrainians a few days ago. But the Ukrainians have done very well in negotiating. It now has stuff in it, important stuff, about American commitment to a free, sovereign and secure Ukraine. American commitment to keep investing in the security of Ukraine.
No, Boris, don't get it twisted. The United States is not going to be guaranteeing any security. Ukraine has actually agreed to President Trump's requested mineral rights, ensuring that 50% of future mineral revenue will be coming back to the United States as a return on investment for giving Ukraine $350 billion. Now, what I see happening here with the EU and what they're trying to finagle is putting boots on the ground in Ukraine to keep the peace. I can easily see how they will try and sucker the United States to funding to support these troops that are going to be on the ground keeping the peace. So apparently, Boris Johnson's trying to make the pitch, as well as our congressmen who are warmongers who want this to continue to keep laundering our tax money, to go ahead and cave and give more money. But Donald Trump is no sucker. And the EU, as well as NATO, are understanding that very quickly. So who is next where they're siphoning the money from? That's going to be the European taxpayer. So already the United Kingdom has sold out its people by committing another, I want to say 4.5 billion or 5 billion, as well as Canada already giving away another 4 billion.
I can announce that a new 3.5 billion euro payment for Ukraine will arrive already in March. Second, as President Costa just has announced, there will be a special European Council, and I will present at this special European Council a comprehensive plan for defense investment, for scaling up our European arms production and defense capabilities, but also for investment in Ukraine's defense industry, scaling up your arms production, your defense capabilities. So this will be a plan for the European Union and for Ukraine. And then there's a third point I want to speak about. That is energy.
The UK is with you today and every day. From His Majesty the King to the NHS workers volunteering in hospitals in Ukraine, to the communities that took Ukrainian refugees to their heart. And that's why I signed our 100-year partnership with President Zelensky last month.
And that's why I signed our 100-year partnership with President Zelensky last month.
First, by stepping up our military support to Ukraine. And the UK is doing that, providing £4.5 billion in military aid this year, more than ever before. We're doing more than ever to train Ukrainian troops, helping Ukraine to mobilise even further. And we're proud to have taken on the leadership of the Ukraine Defence Contact Group. Third, we must bring our collective strength to the peace effort. President Trump has changed the global conversation over the last few weeks, and it has created an opportunity. Now we must get the fundamentals right. If we want peace to endure, Ukraine must have a seat at the table, and any settlement must be based on a sovereign Ukraine, backed up with strong security guarantees. The UK is ready and willing to support this with troops on the ground, with other Europeans, and with the right conditions in place. And ultimately, a US backstop will be vital to deter Russia from launching another invasion in just a few years' time.
No, Keir Starmer, you think you're slick. We're not going to be suckered into this 100-year war that you have agreed to with Ukraine.
So we will do everything we can to get the best outcome for Ukraine and for us all.
So now it makes total sense why a prince of the UK, Prince Harry, has been cheering on and supporting Team Ukraine at his Invictus Games this year. These current active soldiers came to go compete in these games to get a morale boost, then sent back over to fight the war. And here is Justin Trudeau, another supporter of Ukraine and keeping this war going.
That you can take that back to Ukraine with you. I said the same thing last time in Dusseldorf, but I know there's new faces and new competitors here. So the whole world, this whole Invictus community and the whole world stand with you. So take that back with you to Ukraine. And thank you for taking the time to come and join us, guys. It would not be an Invictus game without you.
from the fund they set up. American commitment to financial support for the long-term stability and development of Ukraine. Now, that is good language. What is and that is a great commitment. You know, Ukraine needs to be economically bound into the West, bound in to America.
Boris, you're getting on my nerves. Please shut up.
And this agreement, this resources agreement, would help to do it. I think what's preventing the signing of this deal, sadly, is some of the polemic, some of the rhetoric that we've heard in the last 10 days.
What is Boris Johnson and the rest of the EU not getting? We, the people, have spoken and voted in a president who is not going to waste our hard-earned taxpayer dollars in funding this money laundering operation that is lining their pockets. And I hope people are waking up, because it's these very same people who are the ones that are putting the pressure on these censorship laws to try and control the narrative. They don't want voices from America to be speaking out on the things that they have been doing, as well as the left here in the United States, or the elites that have been getting away with this for the past 4 years. I mean, it's billions of dollars that have been stolen from hard-working, middle-class people. Listen to what our new FBI director, Kash Patel, had to say about Ukraine.
I've asked this Congress to investigate, where has this money gone? The American people are owed that answer, because it's our money. It's our taxpayer dollars.
And there's a lot of really good reason to be concerned, because, you know, the Ukraine was known as a, you know, place of corruption, a place for money laundering.
Yeah. It's not like we sent $1 billion, as if that was even a small number to begin with, right? We've sent 100 times that to one country. I don't know how this Congress is allowed to get away with it. And Zelensky is out there. He went on the world stage and said Russia fired a rocket into Poland, which would literally be an act of war. Well, it turned out that Russia fired no such rocket. It turned out that the rocket came from the Ukraine and was fired into Poland.
And it was a mistake, basically.
If Zelensky's going to go out there and beg the world for more money and come to the U.S. and sit in the well of our Congress and say, we want more money, and then call and demand the new Speaker of the House provide more and more money, and call Mitch McConnell and say, we need more and more machinery, he needs to be more prepared about global statements that bring us to the precipice of war than doing what he did last fall with this missile attack, or this missile launch, I should say. And we just can't have full faith and trust by giving a leader $100 billion and having him say, I'm not telling you where the money went.
It will get done, and it will get done, I think, very, very soon. When it happens, what we in the UK need to do is come in with strong support for what Trump is trying to do to deliver peace, and show how we are going to fulfill our obligations to Ukraine by setting up with the French that European deterrent force in Ukraine, boots on the ground, as Keir Starmer has rightly said, not in a fighting capacity, but there to provide logistics and training support, probably about 30,000 people.
Do you hear how quickly he said that? 30,000 people they're looking to have as boots on the ground to be so-called peacekeepers. Does anybody really believe that we're going to hear stories of how the peace is being kept there? This war is going to continue, and they're going to need an excuse to ignite it back again. I can see the headlines now. Peacekeeper in Ukraine gets struck by military Russian something or other. I mean, literally making stuff up to now re-engage the war machine, to then prey on the heartstrings of so many of us with the propaganda to funnel more money. This is how they have been stealing people's wealth, and they don't care about the amount of people that are dying. They really don't. These people really make me sick.
That will show, not from the UK, but 30,000 all in, that will show the Americans that we are actually serious in our concern, in our determination to ensure peace and security in Ukraine. And that is actually what will, I think, encourage the Americans to remain committed. So
Europe has given a very much smaller percentage than that. I think Europe has given 100 billion, and we've given, let's say, 300 plus. And it's more important for them than it is for us. We have an ocean in between.
It's a grim situation. It's terrible that the Ukrainians are still fighting. But after 3 years of war, Vladimir Putin has not and will not conquer this country. I can tell you, in the last year, all this nonsense, another lie is that Putin is making inexorable progress towards victory. It's a great, big, fat, steaming, stinking lie, Piers. In the last year, he's, I think, taken 0.5% of Ukrainian territory at a cost of about 420,000 troops. It is not going his way. He is not going to win. What we need is for Europeans to dial down some of their anxiety, some of the rhetoric, everybody to dial down the rhetoric, look at what Trump is actually proposing and do a deal that will guarantee Ukraine's security for the long term and reflect the reality, which is, I think for Putin, this war is basically unwinnable.
Okay, look, I concur with much of what you said there. I do, as I said on X earlier, I think you've been steadfast in your support for Ukraine from the very start, and that's very laudable. I felt exactly the same way that you have about this. But there is this weird disconnect by many in America, particularly on the conservative right, who do not share our view, who seem to think that Zelensky is the real villain here, and that Putin was provoked into doing this to safeguard his own security because of NATO encroachment and so on.
No.
What do you say to that specific argument?
It's totally mad. It's totally mad. It's through the looking glass. It's the complete opposite. Putin was not provoked into this act of aggression. His 115 battalion tactical groups that attacked from the north, from the east, from the south, they didn't have some fault in their sat-navs. And the Ukrainians, frankly, were completely innocent and did nothing to provoke him. Nor did NATO provoke him, by the way.
These people really know how to tell some porcupines. That's not true, Boris, and you know that. Listen to Professor Jeffrey Sachs explain really how this Ukraine war started. It started with NATO and expanding into Russian territory, or creeping up into Russian territory.
Under George Bush Jr., 7 more countries were added: Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Slovakia, Slovenia, Bulgaria, and Romania in 2004. Then in 2007, President Putin said at the summit that's taking place right now, the Munich Security Summit, said, stop. You told us no expansion, not an eastward expansion, even an inch, you said. You've now done 10 countries. Stop. Perfectly reasonable. Stop. I don't think our president, Donald Trump, would much like to see China and Russia building their military bases up from Central America. You know, this was how the Russians saw this. Why are you coming to our border when you told us you weren't going to move? In 2008, George Bush Jr. doubled down, as Americans typically do, and said, okay, now we're moving to Ukraine and to Georgia. That was why this war occurred. But Ukraine had one more sliver of life, and that was that they elected a president in 2010 that didn't want to be part of NATO. And the public didn't want to be part of NATO. Why? Because they knew this is very dangerous. Why get into this provocative situation? His name was Viktor Yanukovych. Americans don't like neutrality, but Yanukovych was trying to be neutral between the two sides, and the U.S. played a rather unfortunate role on February 22nd, 2014, in a violent overthrow of this person. And that's when the war started.
We used to dance, sing, do everything in Ukrainian, she says. Poroshenko, Mr. Poroshenko, please listen to us. Why don't you understand your people? Be a man, be human. Please stop your aggression. Stop this war.
And by the way, to say that I had some role in persuading the Ukrainians to fight for their country is a great, it's obviously totally implausible, but it's also a great big fat steaming lie.
In April of 2022, President Biden sent Boris Johnson to Ukraine to force President Zelensky to tear up a peace agreement that he and the Russians had already signed, and the Russians were withdrawing troops.
It's true I went to Ukraine early on in the conflict after they'd kicked them out of the Kiev area, and look, all I said then was we're lost in admiration for what you have done, for the heroism of the Ukrainian people. We can't be more Ukrainian than the Ukrainians. If you have to do a deal in Istanbul or wherever, then obviously that's a matter for you. What I said was, if on the other hand you fight on, I just want you to know that we in the UK are going to do our absolute level best to support you in any way that we can. That's all I said. And I think
I don't buy the story for 1 second. You mean to tell me that Boris Johnson couldn't pick up the phone and say, you know what, you do what's best for you. You don't need to go over to the Ukraine. I mean, what were you going over there for? Unless you were directed by President Biden to go ahead and stop the deal that was just about to happen for peace. We are not going to be suckered again. You guys can do whatever you need to do, but I think it's time for America to bow out, because this is not an equal-sided relationship. The fact that we, the American people, are funding this and there's no end in sight, and the Europeans want to keep it going, and then on top of it want to impose taking away freedom of speech, forget it. Forget it. No, Boris, you lost your case right here. America fully wants this war to be over. We want peace, and we don't want any more people dying. I'm sorry, EU and the UK, that you don't like that idea and that you're no longer going to be grifting off the backs of the American taxpayer, but that's just the way it is, and the American people have spoken. So you can suck it.
I think the war could end soon. Within weeks. Yeah, I think so. Right? Don't you think so? I'd like to have you. I think we could end it within weeks if we're smart. If we're not smart, it'll keep going, and we'll keep losing young, beautiful people that shouldn't be dying. And we don't want that. And remember what I said. This could escalate into a third world war. And we don't want that either.
And there you have it, folks. Until next time.
I think you're a star-spangled